Will the Prime Minister commit to personally calling President Zelensky and apologizing for his personal failure to vet those who were present and recognized on the floor of the House of Commons? Yes or no?
On behalf of all of us in this House, I would like to present unreserved apologies for what took place on Friday and to President Zelensky.
The Prime Minister apologized on behalf of Parliament today for the hurt caused by honoring a Nazi-aligned veteran. This was not a personal apology, but some opposition leaders are saying it should be. So does the responsibility for this controversy actually lie with the Prime Minister? I'm joined now by an expert in government process, Canada's former Chief Officer of Protocol and an adjunct assistant professor at the University of Waterloo, Roy Norton. Mr. Norton, it's good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
You've seen this debate raging over who is responsible, and it may have some Canadians checking, their civics books. Walk us through this. What normally happens jurisdiction-wise when it comes to an invitation of guests to an address to Parliament?
Well, this event is happening in Parliament because the Speaker has agreed on behalf of parliamentarians to let it proceed. The Speaker, parliamentary protocol, who report to the two speakers, both the Speaker of the House and the Senate, would determine who is going to be invited. GAC, Global Affairs Canada, the government, in other words, would have been provided with the opportunity to identify a number, I don't know what the number was, of people who could be seated in the gallery. But fundamentally, the bulk of the people who are invited to come are invited by Parliament. And the process that the Speaker would go through is pretty opaque insofar as the government is concerned. He may have asked the opposition parties to identify names. He might have invited all parliamentarians to identify names. He certainly would have invited a number of people himself, including the gentleman in question whose invitation has created all of this controversy. But that's on Parliament. Right. And on behalf of Parliament. And frankly, the government would have had zero role in inviting Mr. Hunka, or for that matter, most of the people who sat in the gallery. And I think I can say with absolute confidence as a chief of protocol, and these kinds of events took place when I was chief of protocol, if I had asked parliamentary protocol or the Speaker's personal staff or the Speaker himself for a list of who had been invited to come and sit in the seats in Parliament, I would have been told to take a hike.
Okay, that's interesting. So that's in terms of who gets invited, but then there's the level of vetting and security check that happens. So the Speaker has great latitude in terms of who he can invite, but this is being called a personal failure for the Prime Minister by the opposition because they say it's the apparatus of government that should do the security vetting. How did that work? How should that have worked?
Well, I don't think Parliament is willing to cede to the government, to the Prime Minister or to the bureaucracy, the right, the opportunity to vet people whom Parliament invites to come. At least they didn't then, and I don't believe that there have been any changes since. The process that the Speaker, that parliamentary protocol might go through to vet people is itself opaque. They may answer your questions if you ask what they do. They may or may not have access to databases of the RCMP. Certainly at Global Affairs Canada, we do. We have an embedded RCMP officer who presides over this kind of process. But the database in this particular case might not have yielded anything. Right. In as much as Mr. Hunka isn't somebody with a criminal record or whatever. But we, when I was there, and I believe this still pertains, would use search engines to check each name. And you folks in the media certainly found out enough about Mr. Hunka very quickly. And you did it not using RCMP databases. You used it. You used search engines, Google. We do that at Global Affairs. I don't know if the Speaker, if parliamentary protocol does that with every prospective invitee, but they could.
Does that matter if they're a guest of
this?
Does that matter, sir? Sorry to interrupt you, but does it matter if they're a guest of the Speaker? Would there be a different level of rigor applied if it's the Speaker himself inviting a guest?
Yeah, perhaps. I'm prepared to surmise that the Speaker's staff might not subject invitations from the Speaker to the same level of scrutiny that they would require of names submitted by other parliamentarians. I don't know that, but the Speaker is supreme in Parliament. And certainly from the point of view of his staff, I have a feeling that, I mean, bear in mind, this is a gentleman from the Speaker's own riding. And he's invited to come and sit in, I believe, the Speaker's gallery, as in the designated gallery for the Speaker. So whether parliamentary protocol would question, would examine, would push back, I don't know. I assume that if they found something, if they undertook an examination and found something in the case of this particular gentleman, they would have drawn that to the attention of the Speaker, but they may not have done it because they may not be invited to do it.
Right, so it's interesting. There's all kinds of firewalls and silos because of the way Parliament operates in its interaction with government. And that seems pretty clear on a normal day. When it's someone like, I don't know, Joe Biden, who, you know, is a security threat, and President Zelensky, who we know there are bad actors in the world who would like to take out the leader of Ukraine, does any of that change, or does the parliamentary supremacy principle always apply no matter who is being invited and the security environment around that person?
Parliamentary supremacy principle always applies. There might be greater security from the point of view of people being allowed into the building. I mean, everybody who comes in right now has to go through, you know, airport type screening. But when President Biden came and spoke, I have a feeling that there might have been a more intense level. Maybe people were frisked. As to whether they were subjected to a more thorough vetting before presenting themselves at the building for entry with a copy of their invitation, I don't know. But I'm prepared to suspect that they weren't.
So the assertion, certainly, that we've seen play out in all of this, and with the Prime Minister speaking today, is Anthony Rota has taken full responsibility for this. The government argues they played no role in any of this. You find that credible and believable based on your experience? Do you think that is the be-all and the end-all of how this happened?
I find it 100% credible and believable based upon my experience with how things actually work. Whether they should work that way, whether they will work that way going forward is another question. This should provoke a fair bit of self-examination, you'd have to think. But there are two solitudes, or silos, you use the term silos, and the government has zero role in vetting people who sit in the galleries for an event like this one.
Well, I think you're dead right that these rules are going to get a hard look going forward on the security side. Roy Norton, former Chief Officer of Protocol for Canada, thanks so much for your time today.